I'm joined by a special guest, somebody who's worked with budgets with the Prime Minister from 2015 onwards, in between for a short gap, and I think you have charted the course in terms of fiscal discipline. You have seen the ups and downs in India. Many congratulations to keep it at 5.1. You've now put a very, not ambitious, but just 4.9 in terms of fiscal deficit. Why is that? What's the reason behind that? And wouldn't you have been far more aggressive on your position as you have been in the earlier years?
So we received a higher than expected dividend from the Reserve Bank of India, and we have used that partly to further reduce the fiscal deficit for the current year from the originally targeted 5.1% to 4.9%. We have also used it to augment expenditure in some of the sectors where additional spending would be optimal, such as we have added expenditure in rural development in the Gram Sadak Yojana, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. We have some additional expenditure on the price stabilization fund in the consumer protection department, where we aim to increase the buffer stock of pulses and oil seeds. So there were some desirable expenditures which were also added. As a result, we've moved from 5.1% to 4.9%.
Okay, so the other issue, sir, is you've seen state chief ministers and their response. I asked you this during the interim budget, and it had far-reaching implications. As you saw, some of the states went to the Supreme Court, ultimately, like Kerala, about fund allocation. How do you respond to the, and they have a rightful claim over central finances to a great extent.
So, look, I will not comment on the political aspect of some of these things, and that's a matter for the political executive of the state and the center to sort out. I will say this: when it comes to the finance ministry's transfers, what are the things that we handle? We handle devolution, which is share of taxes. We handle finance commission grants. Both of these are determined by the finance commission, and we don't deviate. The other new scheme that we operate is special assistance to states for capital investment. That also is largely formulaic. It goes by a formula. Some part of it is untied, some part of it is tied to specific reform outcomes, and we have actually disbursed money to almost all the states under that scheme, and I have not heard any complaints on that. You referred to a particular one case where there was a disagreement between Kerala and us, particularly the Ministry of Finance, on the setting of borrowing limits. And what was this disagreement on? They have an institution which is a statutory board whose debts are serviced through the consolidated fund of the state. We treated it as part of their aggregate borrowing. They say it should not be treated as that borrowing, and that's a matter where we have followed a uniform practice across states. So it's nothing that was Kerala specific. In fact, I should say that even Kerala has not said that it was state specific on that particular issue. So there are other issues where there are discretionary decisions of the central government as to whether a particular project should be. So wherever it is rule based, wherever it is based on norms or standard practices, I think there has been no discrimination, definitely not in the allocations by the finance ministry, and I don't think even in the case of other ministries. Problems or issues may arise when something is a program of the central government, which the central government has the prerogative to decide where and how it is used. So that is a matter where the elected executive of the center decides in its domain, and the elected executive of the state can ask the center what it wants, but final decisions remain with the center, and that is a realm where officers like me have very little to say.
True enough, but the real issue is that we talk about cooperative federalism. Yes. And if the fact that if in a Niti Aayog meeting chaired by the Prime Minister, state chief ministers do not attend, it sends us, a wrong message in terms of cooperative federalism, because now the entire India bloc CMs will not be participating.
I'm sorry, I'm not capable of answering these political questions.
I know that you're not, but
I have no comments on that.
But Mr. Somanathan, the issue is how do you take it forward? That's the, how do you build confidence of chief ministers and states, because you've been dealing with them, you've been speaking to them. There has to be a wire media to.
I think the official systems continue to work very well. There is politics on one side, but the administrative relationship between the central government and the state government, with all the state government, I continue to be in regular touch with the finance secretaries of the states, the chief secretaries. Our dialogue continues to be very professional, And so this country is very resilient. We have some very good federal systems, and the All India services are an example of a federal system where the same set of officers work both in the state and in the center. So somebody who was my colleague till yesterday in this ministry is now the Finance Secretary of Andhra Pradesh. So, we have mechanisms for dealing with these problems which are outside the realm of politics. Politics is a separate area, but the administrative relationship is not frayed. It continues to work smoothly with all the states.
And you walked a tight rope in particular for Andhra Pradesh, Amravati. You said you will arrange for the funds. So how is that going to be?
It will be through international institutions like the World Bank, ADB, JICA. There are international lending institutions who do extend loans to state governments so long as the center underwrites those loans.
So the center will not be taking the
loans. That particular item will be taken by the state, but it will have to be arranged by the center. And it will not come unless the center stands behind it.
So the rate of interest will be borne by the center or by the states?
Those are details which are yet to be worked out.
The other issues, sir, which where you all worked very hard on, finally the constitutional bench didn't agree with it on the electoral bonds, and the old system still prefers. You didn't touch on the budget. Why is that, and what's the reason behind it?
My colleague in the Department of Economic Affairs handles the electoral bonds. So I don't have much visibility on that issue. I think the constitutional bench has decided something and that will be followed.
And you are not rethinking of...
I wouldn't know.
During the budget discussions?
My colleague Ajay Seth would know. I have no visibility on that.
The other issue, sir, which you are dealing with is the pension scheme. Yes. And we heard a lot about it. I think one of the things that we've heard is this correct, if I'm maybe permitted, that the last drawn salary after you retire, 50% of that will be given to the person. Is that more or less the correct position now?
I'm not in a position to comment on what the specific solution will be. I can only indicate what has been indicated in the budget speech and which I mentioned in the press conference, that we have worked on various financial scenarios and calculations, and what will be the cost of doing this, what will be the cost of doing that, how affordable is this, how affordable is that. And we've engaged in active discussions with all the state governments, because the state governments, many of them are likely to follow whatever, in fact some of them have explicitly said that they're waiting for the central government to take a decision and will be following that model. So we are conscious that what we do will also affect them. So we have to do something that is sustainable for them also. We've had 4 rounds of consultations with our staff associations through the National Council of Joint Consultative Machinery. We have understood what are the core concerns, and while I can say, one thing which I can say as the head of the committee, I can't speak for the government on this, is that a return to the old pension system is completely not feasible financially. It's unworkable, it would be unfair.
It will be disastrous.
It will be a disaster for those citizens of India who are not government servants. It may be desirable for one class of people, but it will be a disaster for the rest. So that is not feasible. But we have understood through these discussions what are the core concerns of employees, that they would like an assurance of the amount of pension they would get and not to be dependent on market fluctuations. Second, that when they retire they would like some form of inflation protection for that pension, because they don't want it eroded by inflation over the long run. And the third, if there are some whose service falls short of the required guaranteed level, could there be a minimum pension for them? These are 3 core sort of concerns that have emerged in these discussions, and I think we will be able to find a way to address these concerns to a satisfactory level, and that is the effort that we are working towards.
So that's in a sense a great beginning, because
no, it's as mentioned in the speech, we will evolve an approach that meets these core needs of employees but preserves fiscal prudence, because what we don't want is a system where I take a decision today and you are very happy, but the liability is paid by a government 30 years down the road who gets pre-committed by a decision which I take today. So whatever we do, we want to do it in a prudent manner, in a proper way that doesn't burden future generations.
It has to be sustainable.
Yes.
But the issue then comes about, for example, schemes like Agnipath, which was brought about, and how will you find that way forward? Because they are after all working for and protecting the boundaries, and this is this thin dividing line. So in a sense.
So I would look, I am not an expert on Agniveer. You will have to ask the Defence Secretary, and I'm not aware of any changes in the Agniveer system. I think it's a good system. I think a lot of armies across the world have moved to short service commissions. The word Agniveer is new, but short service commissions have existed for ages in not only in India but elsewhere also. So short service commissions are a useful way of augmenting, not just augmenting, in fact ensuring that you have a youthful infantry, particularly infantry, where you need youth, you need strength, especially the kind of borders that India has, which are very rugged, difficult terrain, absolutely difficult way. So I think there are a number of merits in the scheme, and I have no knowledge of any attempt to change it.
And you also have a bias towards, I think, because it has a huge implications on the pension bill ultimately. If
it is also financially very prudent, because remember, the armed forces are still on the old pension scheme, and that is a very expensive scheme.
And one rank, one pension.
One rank, one pension.
So it will continue to increase.
So I think yes, it is also financially prudent, no doubt.
The other issue, sir, is on foreign direct investment, and you all have doing a lot of reforms. You want to bring in a lot of things. Can you give clarity to for private investment? What does this mean, and how are you going to go about that entire process?
I think some consultations are on. I don't have the details on what specifically will change in the realm of foreign direct investment. I think the Department of Economic Affairs is working on something. But we are very clear that we are very open to foreign direct investment. We welcome it in every way, shape and form. And India will work towards easing the entry of foreign direct investment through plug. We mentioned a number of things in the speech on plug and play infrastructure, 100 such places being chosen, 10 nodes on the industrial corridors. So these are all going to make it easier for foreign direct investment to come and set up facilities in India without having to go through the entire process of getting regulatory approvals for each step. So all pre-approved a pre-approved package of land, labor, infrastructure, pollution clearance, electricity, roads, water, everything that you need to set up an industry should be ready when you come in. And this is the aim we are working on, and this of course requires close collaboration with state governments to identify these locations. It can't be done across the country, but we can do it in select locations in each state, and those will then become magnets to attract people who want to set up their shop quickly.
And also you've started an internship program which is job related. So I was hearing from the top your boss very clearly that this is a voluntary scheme. Yes. And that you had consulted the private sector to a great extent about the entire process, and they are
we had, let me put it this way, it is voluntary, it's completely voluntary. We had consulted trade and industry on the broad issues of skilling, and they have generally been very forthcoming in terms of saying that this is something they would like to partner on. They have not necessarily been consulted on the specific parameters of the scheme that's been outlined in the budget, no. But it is not contrary to what they are capable of doing. The scheme centers around use of CSR funds in a focused manner for skilling. Now if you look at, there are things which are done in CSR today by these companies, and we are focusing on those companies which are part of the CSR requirement under the Companies Act. There are about 20,000 companies very roughly. They spend approximately 26,000 crores on CSR. Our numbers show that about 100 companies out of the 20,000 account for about 12,000 crores of the total 26,000. So 100 companies are nearly 50% of the total. 500 companies would be nearly 2/3 of that total. So this is a manageable universe which is easy to monitor, work with, and they would be expected, if they volunteer, to absorb a certain number of interns. We will pay for the stipend of the intern, 90% of the stipend. We will pay for the relocation and incidental costs. They have to skill up this person in some trade that they are actually engaged in, or which is in their forward or backward supply chain. So it doesn't have to be themselves. It can be somebody they supply to, somebody they buy from, but they would take sort of overall coordinating responsibility for that. And whatever expense they incur will be from their CSR funds. So it doesn't affect their bottom line in any respect. They do a number of other CSR activities, but those are usually in the domain that the government can also do So the government can also set up schools, the government can also do bus stands, the government can also do, water facilities or toilets, but the government cannot do industrial skilling. So this is a unique advantage which the private sector has, and so our, effort will be that this is a comparative advantage of industry and the services sector. So please do your CSR in an area which is of national benefit, in an area of your comparative advantage, instead of doing things which are in our comparative advantage, such as schooling or some livelihood scheme, etc., which we also do.
But there would be a drawback about how would you decide the intern? Will it be, that it shouldn't be non-discriminatory?
It will be a fair, objective selection through very transparent criteria. That we are clear. What those methodologies will be, we will work out. But it's not going to be discretionary or arbitrary at all.
And
no.
This will be monitored through the EPFO?
No, the interns will not be monitored. That will be through a separate portal. It will be an effort. The nodal ministry will be Ministry of Corporate Affairs. We are likely to be using the resources of Ministry of Skill Development. EPFO will be used for the employment schemes. These are interns, they are not employees, they will not come under the EPFO Act.
One of the things that was silent, which we saw in the budget, was privatization. In terms of, for example, public sector banks, insurance, PSU reforms, which you have been spearheading, getting them to gear up and give good dividends and everything else. Why was that? Why have you all kept silent? Is it a political decision, or is it that
there is a change of emphasis? There is a change of emphasis from focusing on privatization to focusing on the overall value creation of the portfolio of government shareholdings. So my colleague Mr. Tuhin Kant Pandey expresses it very well, and I will paraphrase what he says. So it's like we have a portfolio of shares. Some of them we decide to hold, some of them we decide to partially sell, and we work on trying to improve the value of those companies. So it's a wider approach with multiple options, including disinvestment. Privatization is one of them, but it is no longer a focus exclusively on privatization.
Because the big shift during post-COVID, which the Prime Minister did, was that government should not be in many sectors. And that was the overline. It even went in the 2021 budget speech, but not. Why has there been a slowdown? Is it because that public sectors haven't been able to perform, haven't been able to reform?
In fact, they have actually performed very well. If you look at the market valuations, public sector has performed very well in the last 3 years. That is one of the reasons it has changed.
No, that I know.
Today they are actually doing much better.
But what has stopped you all from privatizing them then?
No, we are still working on things like IDBI. IDBI, we hope to get the clearance from the RBI shortly, and then that will probably go through. Work is going on several of them, but more than this you should ask Mr. Tuhin Pandey.
Okay. One last question, and I know you've been, been from South Block to North Block. Are you ready to go to Rashtrapati Bhavan as?
This is all idle speculation, and these are not. It's not even a fair question, I would say. You should. These are.
So I mean, I'm just. We hope.
I am hoping to be back in Chennai, in my hometown. This is where I would like to be.
Pleasure speaking to you as always, and thank you very much.
Thank you.